Hi, I'm Micah Clark. Thank you for joining us today. Today I'm excited about who we have on our show as a guest, two dear friends of mine. You've probably heard the name Vickie Burress before if you've been a supporter of AFA, because she's the founder, and so we're so happy to have her here today. 30 years ago, AFA was founded in Northern Indiana. So we're going to talk to Vickie, and her husband Phil is a legend as well, with Citizens for Community Values as its director for many, many years. We're going to talk about that as well. One of the major, if not the biggest, pro-family group in Ohio that he was the head of for many years. So Phil and Vickie, it's great to have you guys on.
It's our pleasure. Our pleasure.
So Vickie, let me ask, because we're kind of celebrating our 30-year anniversary of the AFA. I can't believe it's been 30 years, but take us back if you can remember. Why did you start, or what led you to start AFA of Indiana up in Garrett?
Well, I once heard somebody say, if you're going to be upset about something, you should do something about it. And pornography had affected my life. And so I went to a local chapter of American Family Association that was in my county, in DeKalb County, and just loved what they were doing and everything. So I got involved in the local chapter, and then I just moved up and then became president of the local chapter of AFA. And then Buddy Smith down from Tupelo called me one day, and he said, would you like to be the state director? And I said, well, how do I do that? I've never been to college. I'm a stay-at-home mom. And he goes, we've been watching you. We want you to start AFA of Indiana. So I said, okay, with God's help, I will. And so from my little house in Garrett, Indiana, we put a room in there that started the AFA of Indiana. Don Wildman wrote a big letter to all his donors and asking them to support me. And I was just couldn't believe that people wanted to actually give me money to do this. And I had such a passion for it to make a difference in our county and our state. So in 1993, we incorporated and was Hoosiers for Decency.
Yes.
And probably still that, doing business and went from there. And then God just took it, and it exploded, and I was traveling all over the state, and here we are today, 30 years later.
I was working for Indiana Family Institute. I remember how quickly you guys became a statewide organization. But do you remember any challenges that were particularly difficult, or anything that stood out in mind? You built the organization very quickly, but I know it was primarily a decency organization. And you ran into a lot of opposition at certain things. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind? We're looking back a long time. But.
Yeah, so to think back through it, the opposition, a couple things. Being a woman in a leadership position is not as easy as it is a man. I just will have to say that. Back then it wasn't, 30 years ago. And I remember being encouraged by now retired Senator Dennis Cruz. And he was on our local board. From DeKalb County, and just said, you know what, I would hire a volunteer that works really hard before I'd hire somebody with a diploma from a college.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, well, then I can fit that, because I do work hard and I have a passion for it. So anyway, so we worked through that whole woman thing and met with many prosecutors that didn't like the woman thing. And then that was really the challenge. The money, God just provided what we needed. It wasn't an abundance,
right?
But it was what we needed at the time that we needed. And the people just got involved because, I think people need leadership to get involved. Everybody says, I want to do something, and everybody was with us, but they just didn't have direction. So with AFA's help in Tupelo and Citizens for Community Values in Ohio, were my hero sitting here. I wasn't married to you at that point, but we were able to do it and do a lot of things. Pass ordinances, got gas stations to get rid of magazines, pornography magazines. We passed. I had county contacts in all 99 counties. Just work in the state. Really, basically what it was.
I remember one of the big events you had was, to this day, people still tell me, we still have friends on the city council in Fort Wayne, that the biggest council meeting they ever had, you had over 800 people show up pushing for a zoning ordinance in that city.
Yeah. Ed Meese, former Attorney General, was our speaker. We had a former dancer, stripper, that had come to work for me, actually. We'd helped her get out of the strip club. And we just had compassion for these girls because they're caught up in an industry that just wants to use them, and they still are. And Fort Wayne is the capital of strip clubs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know in the state probably, and in all the Midwest, if you would say per capita.
For its size, yeah,
For its
they have
size.
a lot of them, and
Yep.
they've resisted regulations for decades. They do have them now.
We do have some
Yes, they
regulations.
do.
Yes, they're
Yeah.
still operating, but we learned from the inside out, as you know, from that time that the strip clubs were paying off a lot of the city council members, and that's why they wouldn't be passing anything strict.
Yeah.
And they were involved, really deeply involved, and it's something that I learned called the tipping point, and I think Phil taught me that is once you get to a point in a city where where they've tipped the city council or they've tipped the churches. I mean, it's a city of churches. I used to complain to all these churches, you're the city of churches, do something, do something. But anyways, we had a huge 2-year battle there with that, and that was one of my highlights was that council meeting. I'll never forget it.
Well, there's so many. I mean, you had so many big events. You were such a great activist. But we have Phil with us too, Phil Burress from Cincinnati. And Phil, tell us a little bit about your story. You've got an amazing story of how you got involved.
Sure.
At Citizens for Community Values.
Yeah, I was addicted to pornography for 25 years, and I became a Christian in 1980. And my pastor and a bunch of pastors who brought Billy Graham to Cincinnati way back when, were continuing to meet with each other and say, we some issues we have to address, and one of them was pornography. So they started an organization called Citizens for Community Values, and I was there at the first meeting and been involved with it since. In 1991, I became its president, and I was a big follower of AFA. I was very much involved with AFA and actually considered being one of their chapters, but they ended up, the board wanted to go their own direction and be independent. But we still had AFA, and Scott Ross was our executive director, and I volunteered to be the chairman of the committee. And so Scott said, hey, I'm going to Mississippi to an AFA meeting. You want to go with me? And I said, sure. So this was early 1994. And Scott and I are sitting there together, and all the leaders from the different states were there. And then Vickie started speaking, and I just listened to her, and I turned to Scott and I said, who is that? I said, I'm so fascinated with how smart she is and how well spoken she is. And he said, oh, she's from over in Indiana. And I said, oh, that's not too far away. And so we ended up talking, and, had no idea that several years later, that I realized that she was single, and so was I at the time. And I thought, well, she wouldn't be interested in an older guy, would she? And sure enough, I invited her out to go to a movie or something.
You did?
And but the first thing I did before I asked her to marry me, I did go to her children and asked them if it would be okay, and they said, sure, that's okay, get her out of the house. But anyway, so I ended up, and then in 1991 became president of CCV, and was there for 25 years, and I retired in 2017.
And one of your successes is Cincinnati was really unique among a lot of other cities because of the victories you had. Weren't they one of the few cities that size that did not have sexual-oriented businesses because of the work you had done? And Larry Flint, didn't he live or target that area?
He did, because that's where Larry was from, the Dayton, Cincinnati area, and it's still true today. They do not have any bookstores, adult bookstores. Larry Flint has a place in downtown Cincinnati. He opened it just to stick a finger in the eye of the prosecutor. But I've been assured down through the years that he's not selling anything that's prosecutable, because we did take him to court. And Larry and I kind of liked Larry Flint, even though he was a very terrible individual, and he's since passed, and he sexually abused all three of his daughters. And but when I met him, I kind of liked him, but he just got off the wrong track. But we fought like cats and dogs on court TV, and many times. And it was a very interesting relationship I had with him, because he would call me a porn addict, and I would tell him he's no friend of the First Amendment. He'd get mad and beat on his wheelchair. So anyway, it was an interesting fight, but we still today, the reputation still lingers that if you come to Cincinnati and try to open up a sex business, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I remember some years ago was there was a front page article on your local newspaper, and what was a great testimony to you and made you one of my heroes, you already were, but the ACLU, if I remember right, their director praised you up and down, saying, I don't agree with this guy on anything, but he's one of the nicest guys. I respect him. He handles himself well, and you don't have to be, a provocateur to fight this battle.
No.
You fought it with facts and figures, and you got the praise of the other side, which very rarely ever happens.
Yeah, after 2004, when the marriage amendment passed, and the New York Times wanted to do an article with me, who is this guy, that helped elect George Bush, because Ohio, if you remember right, made the decision on who was going to be president that year, and that's when we had the marriage amendment. And but anyway, the Columbus Dispatch as well wanted to do a story on me, and it scared the dickens out of me because they are notorious for tearing us apart. And when the newspaper article came out, my daughter called me and said, Dad, the article is on the front page, and it is below the fold, but you're not going to believe the title. The title of the movie of the article was "Even His Enemies Liked Him."
Yeah, that was
And I that was one of the things that I liked about what I did all those years, was because I wanted to dispel the notion that somehow I hated homosexuals or anything like that. I mean, I was addicted to pornography for 25 years. Who am I to throw stones? That's not a whole lot different than being addicted to homosexuality, or whatever they're struggling with. And I understood it. And I would acknowledge to them, hey, I know your feelings are real. I understand that. And I'm not opposed to you. I'm opposed to the idea of you forcing your agenda on everyone else in Ohio or anywhere else in the country. And that's why I ended up leading the marriage amendment in 2004. Now let me go on from there and talk about something else, if you don't mind, because this is really important when we talk about issue one that just happened. And this was 19 years ago, 2004. Excuse me. We had 3,300,000 people vote for the marriage amendment. And they won the abortion fight with only 2,100,000 votes. So what happened in Ohio was people didn't know what was going on. They didn't come out. When we discovered something really important, I think it's true in Indiana too, working with Vickie and her being involved in all 92 counties. But we found out that rural Ohio is where the votes are. George Bush in 2004 lost Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, Akron. He lost 5 of the 6 major cities and still won. And that's because we hit on something that we found, and that was going out. We had a bus. We went out to over 2,200 churches. We visited personally. We printed almost 3 million voter inserts, and we got the Christians in the rural counties to come out. And if you look at the data, the same thing happened again this time, except rural Ohio did not show up.
Do you think people are overwhelmed, or is it did they get a poor messaging out, or was it just the people are not aware, or do they tend not to vote? And I mean, we typically call this an off-year election.
Yeah,
that's right.
So is it? If it had been in a presidential year, do you think the results might have been different?
It might have been, and we might find out. Because this is not going to stand. I can tell you right now, and I don't have any inside information, but I'm telling you right now that the people I know the governor, worked with him many times. In fact, I was one of his biggest opponents when he opposed the marriage amendment way back in 2004. He came out against it, but he came to me and apologized and said he was wrong. And when he was Attorney General, he fought to win Ohio. In fact, he did. Win in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals on our marriage amendment, which ended up sending the case to the Supreme Court. So he's as pro-life as you can get. I'm telling you, they will not settle this. So either next year or the next year, probably after that, there will probably be another constitutional amendment. But this time, we need the life of the mother, incest and rape. You know, that's only like, that's less than 1%.
Right.
Yeah.
Even by the Alan Guttmacher Planned Parenthood statistics, it's less than 2% or 1%.
We need to,
Yeah.
you
Let's
know,
save 98% of the babies.
Yes.
I understand people that are saying save them all or none, but no, I don't either. I don't understand
Yeah.
that.
I don't understand it.
But anyway, I want to save 98 or
Yes.
99% of the babies. So suck it up and let's put it on the ballot and let's win.
Well, Jeff and I were talking about this in a video a while back. You know, we're not a referendum state in Indiana, and you know, so I'm very involved in the legislative process. But every session of the legislature, they don't talk about, but they about 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, they have a technical corrections day, because even when they go through committee hearings and the month-long process of passing bills, sometimes they make mistakes. Well, you put up a poorly written amendment like this was. There's all sorts of questions now about what happens if an older man brings in a minor for an abortion, and it's statutory rape, or he's a trafficker, or a pimp, and now you're going to say abortion clinics just regulate themselves, and they don't. You know, what does this strip away everything you guys worked for?
Everything.
And what all did you have on the books?
We had the heartbeat bill.
Heartbeat bill.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so after the heartbeat, the baby was protected. That's what was on the books, and we fought for 12 years to get that, and then we finally got it through about 2 years ago.
And that's
So-
such a common sense issue. When people say, maybe I'm pro-choice, but if the baby's got a heartbeat, I'm not for that.
Right.
Right. The opposite of life is
Yes.
no heartbeat.
Right. So this wipes out probably the medical inspections. Do you have
It
Department of
opens
Health?
up the door for anything that they want. I mean, the language is so poorly written, and when you do that, you can't go out and explain it.
Right.
You know, to
In a
12 million
60-second
people.
commercial. Yeah.
I mean, Ohio has 12 million people. You know, and you know, to win something with only 2 million votes like this, it's just a travesty. They can yell and scream all they want to that the people have spoken. No, they haven't.
Yeah.
Not all of them haven't
Right.
spoken. You know, let's get everybody to the polls and see what happens. And I think putting it on the ballot in the presidential election will force the issue.
How hard is that to do? Because I don't even know that.
Well, we can go either way, like you just said. We can collect signatures. In 2004, when I did the marriage amendment, they wouldn't put it on the ballot, the legislature. So I collected over 600,000 signatures statewide.
Okay.
Okay, but this time the legislature's putting it on the ballot. We have
Because it raises so many problems for
we
them.
own the
We
House, we own the Senate,
have
and we own all state
good
positions
people.
are all Republicans, and so they can put anything they want on the ballot.
Okay. Good.
And
Sound
I-
familiar? You have all Republicans, but you can't get anything passed.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes
We've
it
been there
does.
sometimes.
No, but we did. So
Yeah.
so
But
let's
you did,
Let's
yes.
back up a minute, though.
Yeah.
In August, the legislature put to raise the percentage to pass a constitutional amendment from 50 to 60%. Okay,
Right.
we lost that. Okay, so that was a bold move by the legislature to do that. And when I did in 2004, I won by 62%. I think it should take over 60% to change the
Sure,
state's constitution. But we lost that because the money that come in from the outside, from all over the country and all over the world to support the abortion issue was unbelievable. We could not come close to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you're both involved in national politics some. We work with Family Research Council quite a bit and other organizations, AFA. What do you look ahead? You know, it's always this way the day after an election. I don't care how the results are. The media says all the Republicans got trounced. And then kind of a few days later you say, well, they won Long Island. You know, they won here, they won there. What do you think of the people who are saying abortion is a losing issue for Republicans?
Well, that's a losing statement.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to accept killing and slaughtering babies
Right.
while they're still in the womb, then what else is left?
Yeah.
We talk about how much disrespect there is right now.
Yeah.
Even on the highways or anywhere else, I think a lot of that feeds back to the fact that if we're not going to respect life in the womb,
Yeah.
how are we going to respect people, adults or anyone else? And they're just dispensable. But I won't stand still for that kind of talk, you know, because if you're not pro-life, and I'm going to tell you something else too. These voter guides that they put out, and I've been so upset about this for years with the Right to Life people, is that they will ask somebody, are you pro-life? And they'll say yes, and so people
Right.
vote for them. But then when it comes down to doing
Right.
something,
Right.
you know, they don't do a lick.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to be careful of. I want to know what you've done to save babies,
Yes.
not what you think.
Yeah. Well, to answer my own question too, I'm sure there were times in the 1800s when people thought, well, slavery is a losing issue. but you do what's
Absolutely.
right no matter what.
Right.
And so Vickie, when you started, things were a lot different. I mean, people had to drive to the dirty part of town to get pornography. This was kind of the pre-internet days. How big of a problem is internet pornography now for our audience? You and I know it's massive. It's quite different than it was when you started.
It's every child, and I used to say the average age of exposure to pornography is 9 years old. I would say that's much younger now even. Parents that don't put filters on their computers and try to protect their kids are I don't understand that. Let them go out and play in the road. And, it's the same type of thing. It's everywhere, but at a point, it's not in the hotels like it used to be.
Right.
It's not on the TVs and CCV. We ran a campaign on the hotel, cleanhotels.com. It's in your hand, and I think people are more aware of it. You can get porn anywhere you want, anytime you want. That's what we hear, and you wonder how the porn industry is making any money. But they are with ads, I suppose. I don't know. So is it worse? Yeah, it's worse.
Yeah.
I think the key, and I've always said this from the very beginning, don't tell your kids if you're exposed to pornography, you need to do this. Tell them you will be when you're exposed to pornography. This is what God intentions for good sex and bad sex, sexuality, and we've got to be teaching our kids 5, 6, 7 years old, which is sad. But we have to become parents and stop letting the schools take over the parenting and teach them about sex and that sex is a good thing in marriage, and you need to embrace that and teach your kids about it. So I think we've come down to education, actually.
Well, you talk about the tipping point, and it's interesting. We have several candidates already running for governor for next year.
Oh, sure.
And one of the most recent candidates who's gotten in, I won't name him at this moment, but not a social conservative, but it's interesting, his very first proposal is for age restriction on internet material, particularly pornography websites, TikTok, things like that. And he's got the money where he probably pulled on that, I'm guessing. But when you have a traditional moderate saying, hey, this is so bad, we got to protect kids from the internet, from pornography, that tells me we might be at the point where almost every parent says, yes, protect my child from this.
Well, what I found, and you've seen this too, is that he's been affected by it.
Probably.
So that's when people usually get involved and and will run for a city council when they won't pave their street, or I mean that's just a small thing. But I think he's probably had some experience, and someone in his family's been hurt by pornography or saw it.
Well, what we have in libraries now is come back. You started that 5 years ago, but it's a big issue here in Indiana now with particularly written material on homosexuality. These stories kids are reading, and these are all new books. They're in schools now. It's not like used to be, well, Tom Sawyer or Mark Twain has the N-word in it. It's now stuff that is these new authors, I don't know where they're coming from, writing stuff that is just flat out disgusting. And parents are everywhere, in Virginia, other places, rising up over this. I hope we're at a tipping point for this kind of stuff.
The library has been an issue. I mean, we started family-friendly libraries a long time ago. Oh, man. You started that out of your office, probably?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Karen Gano out of Virginia started two family-friendly libraries.
Yeah.
And I served on a library. I was complaining about it, and like Vickie said a minute ago, if you're going to complain about something, be willing to do something.
Yeah.
So one of the commissioners called me and said, it's our turn to appoint one of the library board members. We want you. Yeah. Oh, geez. So I served on the library board for 7 years, and I was able to convince them. In fact, every year we got somebody else appointed other than a left-wing library supporter. We were there I was on there to represent the taxpayers, to represent the people that live there, not a political agenda. So we were able to get rid of all the pornography. We were able I believe in every library you should have age-appropriate material. You shouldn't all just be open to everybody, because that's the American Library Association's, it's really interesting because I've always heard the term right to read, and I thought that just meant that you had a right to read, that to actually read.
Learn to read.
That from them, that means they have the right to read anything they want, even pornography.
Yeah, which is astonishing because on all the zoning ordinances you worked on, You have to be 18 to get into an adult bookstore, 21 if there's a liquor license at a strip club, and yet kids don't have to go to the adult bookstore. They can read about it in school, and sometimes they are, and the parents don't know about it until afterwards. So
yeah, I mean, I remember Nora Hovey and I were down at Indiana University, doing a big conference on the library, and that's the bed of Kenzie.
Yes.
So not right word to use, but that's
the armpit of
the armpit of Kenzie. Which everybody thinks is just wonderful. That's down at IU, and we fought really hard, and Woody Burton was a wonderful help in that and trying to get that passed. But here again, we had Republican legislature, and we couldn't get things passed. It was very frustrating. The legislature was not my forte. You're really good at it. I got very frustrated with it, and it just would make common sense, the things that we propose and that were coming before them. And you're a Republican, you're supposed to. And then I don't know how you handle that, but you're doing a great job. And that's one reason we did move the office to Indianapolis, because what year was that? Maybe
2000, maybe?
Yeah, 2000. Moved it to Indianapolis because we knew that we had to be more involved in the legislature to get anything done. And Phil has always said this, and I learned this from him way before I met him, is that you get what you elect. So if you don't have good people in the office, or you don't have good sheriff or whatever, you can pass all the laws you want, but you're not going to get them enforced. So
well, and you've been living in Ohio for a while. I don't remember if we talked about this or not, but in this legislative session this spring, we finally got an amendment to the budget that defunds Kenzie. It's not funded by state tax dollars anymore. The Senate left it in, and it passed.
Wow.
And there's actually, as we speak now, yesterday there was a debate on the IU board. They put it off, but IU actually wants to disassociate itself from Kenzie and make Kenzie a separate 501c3, let them fund themselves.
Wow.
So that's and that's a good point. What kind of victories, Phil, did you see? That's a victory that took 20 years or more, 25 years.
25 years.
Have you seen any victories that you started that are now come to mind? I don't put you on the spot.
Things have changed so much. Like you said, when you first started fighting pornography, it was a local bookstore or something like that. When I retired in 2017, the one thing I told the board was that you have to move the office to Columbus from Cincinnati. We have to be at the State House. We have to be in there, because what good does it do, if you don't elect the right people and the right prosecutors to office? And we found a young man out of Arizona that took my place.
He's phenomenal.
He's phenomenal.
Yeah. Aaron Burress is his name. If you live in Ohio, CCV, Aaron Burress is somebody you want to look up.
Yeah. And the name of the organization is still CCV, but it's Citizens for Christian Virtue.
Yes.
And if you look it up,
Center for Christian Virtue.
And so, if you look it up, it's very interesting, because they now have a staff of about 25 or 30 people. Their money is just pouring in because of the difference, because they're standing for righteousness. Right. And the interesting thing about this, I mentioned earlier about the Columbus Dispatch, how they used to lambaste me, and they were awful on all the issues. We just bought their building. We just bought.
That should be our goal. We want to buy the Indianapolis Star building sometime.
We just bought the Columbus Dispatch building, and there's a huge sign on top of it, Columbus Dispatch. That I'm sure they're going to put something up there about, accept Jesus as your personal Savior or something.
And that sign's grandfathered.
And it's catty corner from the State House, looking right down on the State House. And I don't mean to gloat over that, but there were some writers there that really took me to task a few times, and I said, I want to know what desk they had. I want to go in there and sit down.
Well, and that has, I don't know if this is this way in Ohio. It certainly is in Indianapolis. The Indianapolis Star is a shell of what it once was. Do you see a decline in newspapers in Ohio too?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and they're struggling for just mere existence. They always depended on advertising, but the internet has just changed everything, and social media, and Facebook. I'm pretty much fed up with that. I tried to just stay in touch with my family, but every 2 ads as an ad. I'm sick of it, you know, pushing what I don't. I used to go in there and delete them all. I got tired of that too because you can't delete them all.
Yeah.
But it's a whole new world now, and print media is basically going out of business. Dayton Daily News was another one that was horrendous about us, and I had many fights with them even inside their offices over some of the issues, and but they're basically out of business.
Yeah.
They had to sell their big building there on I-75. They can't afford it.
Yeah. Well, you two have made a huge difference in Indiana and in Ohio, and I appreciate all the work you did. I appreciate you hiring me in 2001, Vickie.
Well,
it's been the blessing of my life. Yeah.
It was just a God thing, Micah.
It was. It really was.
You worked at all the
perfect timing.
Perfect timing, and Micah had such experience, and he worked at all these. He looked at every pro-family group there was in Indiana. You just couldn't keep a job. So
That's right.
So I thought I would give you a job, right? But you learned from the best.
Yes,
I mean, you got Eric Miller. I mean, just a champion in the pro-family movement, and Bill Smith, and you know, just down through the years.
And they were all friends. You know, there was never any.
Exactly.
That was one of the things I did in Ohio was I started the Ohio Family Forum, and I would bring them all the leaders together, you know, 2 or 3 times a year because I got tired of the infighting.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, when you're looking at somebody face to face and you realize they're thinking the same way you do and believe the
You're
same
on the
way,
same side.
you know, you got to work together.
Well, and when you realize there's 3 or 4 pro-family groups in Indiana, but at the drop of a dime, Planned Parenthood can have a dozen people there because they've got so much money and things like that. So we have to work together, and we do very well. But is there anything you want to leave our audience with as encouragement for things you've learned or to be involved? And I mean, you both are testimonies to staying in the fight for decades and being faithful to God's calling. You know, God doesn't always promise us victory, but He calls us to be faithful.
That's what I would say. My important. You don't have to be somebody that's like super educated or important, or you don't have to be high up or to know the right people or anything. Make a difference in your own community right where you're at, and don't give up. The battle is God's. It's not. It's ours is to stand up and fight. It's not to cower down and said, "Oh, Jesus is coming today, so I'm not gonna." You know, I don't need to fight this battle because Jesus is coming back. Well, yeah, we are. We should. We need to be occupying until He comes back, and just encourage people to be involved in American Family Association. Right?
Yes.
A young man called me the other day who's wanting to start a 501c3 down in Florida, and he said to me, he said, you know, I'm called to this. This is what I'm called to do, but I hate raising money. And I said, do you realize you just went from calling to I?
Yeah.
And I says, if God called you, God will support this.
Exactly.
But what you have to do is you have to learn to be obedient and ask for the money. You need to sit down and tell people what you're doing. And my final words to you and everyone here that's watching this: support AFA of Indiana.
Absolutely.
Well, I find that some of these other groups on the other side, they get all these grants, all this government funding, but they're not very efficient with us. With it, we're taught to be, just because we have a stewardship issue, we raise $25, $50 gifts. I think we're a lot more efficient than some of our opponents are at times.
I've always said that about AFA.
Yeah.
You know, you hear other large pro-family groups nationally, they'll be raising millions and millions of dollars. Here's Don setting out those letters of 25, and when the economy goes bad, Don continues, and we continue on. It was the same way with us. I can remember getting letters with 4 stamps on it, and said, "This is all I can afford to send you." You know, little old ladies from Southern Indiana, and or 4 quarters, and this is all, and that meant more, not more. I mean, that I shouldn't have hit my mic. Sorry, but it meant so much.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we still have donors at AFA who started when you started in 1993. I could name people that I know you would know.
I would know.
But and there are people we have several people who give $1 a month.
Yep.
And you know what? But the thing is,
then.
that person who gives $1 or that person who gives $500, that's one phone call to a legislator. I would much rather have 10 $1 donors who could make 10 phone calls at the drop of a hat.
Exactly.
And a phone call doesn't cost anything.
Grassroots wins.
It does.
It all the way through every day.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. I love you guys.
It's a pleasure.
You've been mentors to me for years. You've been on our board for years. And you just do. And we also share an anniversary.
We do.
Same day.
The same exact. I couldn't come to your wedding.
I know, I
because was
invited you to
getting
my
married.
wedding, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm
Yes,
getting
I'm-
married too. Same day.
Same
So
day.
Sheree and I and Phil and Vickie share the same anniversary.
25 years
Yes,
this year.
That's
Where'd you
right.
spend yours?
I had COVID.
You had COVID? We were in the
spent mine-
hospital.
I was in the hospital.
Yeah.
He had a rare.
Yeah. So we spent in the living room watching TV.
Yeah.
But it's God's been good.
It is
So.
all the time.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
joining us. I appreciate you for watching as well, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for supporting AFA. If you'd like to learn more about us, our website is afain.net. That's afain.net. I'm Micah Clark. We'll see you next week.